More of the Zach Gelb Show on Fox Sports 920 The Jersey.
All right, welcome back in. 416 from the Princeton Orthopedic Associates studios. This is the Zach Gelb Show right here on Fox Sports 920 The Jersey. Giants training camp underway. And Odell Beckham, of course, is front and center with his comments yesterday that he wants to be the highest paid player in the National Football League. That's not going to happen. Maybe the highest paid wide receiver. And John Mara, the owner of the Giants, also had many words of extolment for Odell Beckham. I'm pretty confident they'll get a deal done, but there is a lot of time to go by before a deal does get done. So let's get the latest on Odell, Mara, and all the rest of the New York Football Giants with Dan Duggan, who does a great job covering the New York Football Giants Big Blue as a beat reporter for NJ.com. And Dan is kind enough to hop on board with us right now. Dan, appreciate a few minutes. Thanks for the time as always, and how are you?
I'm doing great, and absolutely anytime.
Well, thanks so much for coming on. So what do you make of these Odell Beckham comments yesterday?
Yeah, well, obviously we couldn't make it through, one day of training camp without him being front and center, like you said there. It's just kind of the way things go with Odell. What he said is not the craziest thing in the world. I don't think he's going to be the highest paid player in the NFL, but it's not unrealistic, for him to have that goal. But it's just, why do you need to say that? Why do you need to have that come out, the start of training camp, to put it at the forefront, whereas the contract stuff kind of had died down after OTAs and minicamp, and then he revs it right back up. And I think he knows what he's doing, because he's certainly got a ton of headlines out of it. It's become, kind of the hot topic around here. John Mara just spoke to reporters, and pretty much every question revolved around Odell and his contract. So, I'm going to give him some credit for being a little bit calculating. I think he wants this topic at the forefront, because I think we're at a point now, if I'm Odell's agent, negotiations haven't started. Well, they should be starting right now. I'd be on the phone, over to the Giants right now and saying, let's get the ball rolling here rather than just talking about it through the media. So I think we'll have to see where that goes. I think the whole thing is going to be fascinating to see how it plays out, especially when the bar is starting at highest paid player, in the NFL. It'll be interesting to see how the sides can kind of come together from there.
What was the general gist of what Odell and also John Mara did say when they spoke to the media today?
Odell, to his credit, he didn't backtrack, which a lot of these guys do when they have a kind of controversial comment. He really couldn't backtrack because it was on that uninterrupted site, which basically he has control over what comes out. So, he knew what was going to be in the video, and he could have not said that or not had that contract comment included in there. But he tried to say that, that's just what he feels, but it's not a big deal. He's here to play. He kind of plays dumb, like, I don't know how contracts work and stuff. I'm sure he's probably read up a little bit or talked to some people who do know. But his stance is pretty much, I'm here to play. And, to his credit, he is here. Aaron Donald is in the same exact position with the Rams. And, as far as I've read, he held out today. So Odell is, showing up and saying he's going to put the work in. And if it means he makes $1.8 million this year, I guess that's what he's going to have to deal with. He's got that Nike money to fall back on a little bit. But yeah, that was pretty much his overriding message. And then from John Mara, it was really pretty cut dry. It's like, we're going to pay Odell. We're going to pay Odell a lot of money. It's really just a question of when, not if. There's pretty much no qualifiers on the fact that they're going to pay Odell. The question, like I said, really just becomes, is it going to be before the season, during the season, after the season? But it seems like it's certainly going to get done from the Giants' perspective.
We know he's a great talent. We know he's a great player, and we saw how important he was. He was the most imperative part of that Giants offense last year. So, hey, it's no secret. They're going to get a deal done. The question is, how long will this thing take, as we're talking to Dan Duggan. But the big thing that has been in question, which we're alluding to and talking about a little bit earlier on in the interview, is his behavior. And you see some of the antics that he pulled last year, did not play well in New York, really for the last 2 years, going back to the Norman situation. Jerry Reese said it's time for him to grow up. How do you think his behavior will be this year, especially after they have a tough loss?
Yeah, it's interesting because they kind of started the offseason with some tough talk, like you said, with Jerry Reese, basically putting in, Odell on the spot to say it's time to grow up. And then they really haven't followed through with that at all. Everything since then has been back to kid gloves. I don't know if that's the right approach. Obviously he's been tremendously productive, but I think maybe holding his feet to the fire a little bit on some of that maturity stuff might have been the right way to go. But like I said, they've really laid off of that, and John Mara's throwing bouquets at Odell's feet every time he talks about him right now. So I don't know. Will Odell change? He's a young guy, he's 24 years old, but kind of hour jar at some point, and, unless something really drives him to change. And I don't know that he is really capable of changing significantly, and maybe a few years down the road. But I think right now he's shown that he clearly likes to be in the spotlight. When the lights come on, it's time to get on the field. He's still going to be insanely passionate and competitive player. Now, does that mean he will still be punching holes in walls after losses? Obviously, that's something the Giants would like to see be eliminated. But only time will tell. And like I said, there's really nothing Odell has kind of said or done since the end of the season that leads you to believe that he's a changed man. And again, not that he needs to change anything drastically. It's just kind of rein in some of the extra stuff that's just kind of unnecessary. But at the end of the day, he's not getting in trouble off the field. His teammates do like him, even for all the sort of distractions that some of his behavior creates. But they still like him, so it's not like he's this divisive figure in the locker room. So I think that's an important thing to keep in perspective.
How many wide receivers in the league do you think are better than Odell Beckham?
If you're saying right now today, I think I'd probably put Antonio Brown at 1, Julio Jones at 2, and if I had the third pick and got Odell Beckham Jr., I'd be pretty darn happy. You know what I mean? You can kind of take any of those three guys, put the name in a hat, and draw them out, and I don't think you're going to be too disappointed. Odell, the thing he has over those guys is that he is 24, and what he's done in his first 3 years is really, you can measure it up against any wide receiver in history for their first 3 seasons. Those guys have, been around longer, so they've had, maybe more of a chance to establish themselves and put up some big numbers. But, you definitely can make a legitimate argument that he's the best wide receiver in the game. And even if you don't think he is right now, I think you look ahead in 5 years, the trajectory for him is a lot higher than those guys because they're going to be, kind of on the downside, and he's still on the way up.
And you take a look at this wide receiver unit the Giants have this year. They have Odell. We all know the talent he is. They still have Sterling Shepard getting ready for year number 2. And then they add Brandon Marshall in the offseason. So a lot of high expectations for this Giants offense this year, which was not great last year because of really only having Odell on that offensive side of the ball that was playing really consistent football week in and week out. How about this wide receiver group, and what are you hearing early on about them?
Yeah, I think it should, should be really good. The sky should really be the limit for this group. Again, if you take a guy who's, kind of a hands-down top 3 wide receiver in the league, and you pair him with Sterling Shepard, who had a really strong rookie year, and I think kind of people are sleeping on him a little bit, but he's probably going to get better. Obviously, most guys get better between year 1 and year 2, so if he can build on what he did last year, that's a big weapon out of the slot. And I think Brandon Marshall is, just kind of a big-time X factor because they had Victor Cruz playing out of position and clearly a diminished Victor Cruz, playing on the outside last year. Now you bring in a guy, Brandon Marshall, who's, the prototypical outside wide receiver with his size, and I think he's a perfect fit for this offense. The only question there is he's 33 years old. Has he lost a step? Even if he has, they're not asking him to come in and be the Brandon Marshall of his prime when he would have to get 100 catches and 1,000 yards. He's going to be the number 2 to Odell, maybe the 2A with Sterling Shepard. And he said all the right things as far as accepting that. Now, I don't know if that would have worked, 5 years ago, but he's come a long way. Anyone who's kind of followed him knows that he's obviously been through a lot. But he's also a guy who's never been to the playoffs in his career, and I know he wants to change that. So I think it's a good situation. It's probably the right time for the Giants to get him. It's a 2-year deal, so they're not going to be locked down too long with him. But if you just look at it on paper, it should line up really well to have him opposite Odell. Just defenses shouldn't be able to focus as much attention on Odell, and if they do, they have a guy who should be able to make a pay on the other side this year.
Now, the biggest question with the Giants, and it's no secret, we know they have weapons, but the question is, will Eli have time to throw the ball to those weapons? This offensive line, I know it's extremely early, but pretty much knowing what it's going to look like. What do you make out of this offensive line, and can you give me anything why Giant fans could feel a little bit positive about this offensive line going into this year?
I'm probably not the guy to give you anything positive. I've been banging the drum all offseason that it was a
Neither
huge
am I,
mistake for
Dan.
them
Neither am I.
I just think it's hard to go into the offseason, have a glaring weakness, and then basically not address it at all. They made, a 6th-round draft pick and some free agents for the kind of the backup roles, but you're looking at the same 5 offensive linemen who couldn't get the job done last year, and you just bring them back with very little competition for their jobs. I don't understand how you can think that they'll be significantly better. I know that, they're kind of spreading the Kool-Aid here that, Eric Flowers and Bobby Hart are young, and they're going to take these huge strides in year 3. Could it happen? Sure, but it feels like to me it's just a lot of blind faith. They're really trying to push the message of Eric Flowers and Bobby Hart trained here, and they weren't really hard. Well, I mean, every offensive lineman in the NFL basically trains hard. And the offseason doesn't make you a good offensive lineman. So, as you can tell, I'm not exactly buying into all that. And I think if the team does have an Achilles heel, it will be the offensive line. Now, that being said, you add some of these other weapons. You add a guy like Rhett Ellison, who's a blocking tight end. You have Paul Perkins as the running back, who should be a more dangerous threat than Rashad Jennings was last season. Maybe they can still make it work, but I definitely think that's going to be the biggest hurdle for this team is you had a bad offensive line, you didn't do anything to upgrade it, and you're kind of crossing your fingers and just hoping it gets better. And, obviously the jury's still out on that.
With the state of the offensive line, let's get to the quarterback. And knowing that this offensive line is probably not going to be good this year, but they do have improved weapons like we're talking about. When we get to the quarterback, how much do you think he has left in the tank at this point?
Yeah, that's obviously another big question. It's hard to answer right now, but I mean, I think when you watched Eli last year, I don't know that his struggles were, an age, related issues. I mean, obviously he's gonna have some decline when he turned 36 years old, but it wasn't as if he was floating balls out to the sideline and he couldn't throw the ball with any velocity. He couldn't get the ball downfield anymore. A lot of it, I think, was that the offensive line didn't give him a ton of time. I think a lot of it was the play calling was very predictable, so it was hard for anyone on the offense to really thrive because it seemed like defenses kind of knew what they had to worry about, and they were able to shut it down pretty easily. And you also got to keep in mind, Eli's never been a guy who put up Tom Brady stats year in and year out. He's very hot and cold, and last year was probably a little bit more cold than he had been the previous 2 years, but he also had two of the best years of his career just prior to last season. So I don't think he's done. Obviously the clock is ticking a bit, but I think with these weapons they have, I wouldn't be surprised if he raises his game. And I think that, you have to feel good, I think, going into this year with Eli at the helm.
Wrapping up with Dan Duggan from NJ.com, covers the New York Football Giants. All right, let's get to the strength of the team, and we all know that's the defense, which is an elite defense and a championship caliber defense. They displayed that last year. You look at this defense, no more Jonathan Hankins. You have the little battle for that extra safety spot. The defense, we know it's going to be very good. What stands out to you about this defense, and then what are some things that you still think they need to improve on?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that stands out is, like you said, it's just clear the strength of this team, and they're in a good spot because a lot of their best players are relatively young. So I think you expect guys to even continue to make strides. Landon Collins went from kind of a rough rookie year to basically a defensive player of the year candidate overnight. And now can he get even better in year three? I mean, that's kind of a scary thought, but it's certainly possible. A guy like Eli Apple at cornerback was a first-round pick last year and kind of had the ups and downs you'd expect, but I think he'll be better in year two. And then you have so many guys who are, proven commodities, whether it's Snacks Harrison or JPP, Olivier Vernon, Janoris Jenkins, DRC, go on and on. There's just a lot of quality players on this defense. You mentioned Hankins' departure. I think obviously that defensive tackle spot's kind of the one biggest question mark, but that's not bad when that's your biggest question mark because you have three studs that are going to be playing alongside. Whoever goes in there, they're not asking that guy to come in and be a world beater. He just needs to kind of fill a role and do the dirty work. Linebackers, there's no superstars there, but there weren't last year, and it certainly didn't hold them back. I'm interested to see what B.J. Goodson, who was the fourth-round pick last year, does because he's really kind of been handed the keys at middle linebacker. So I think that's a position that actually could be an upgrade because I wasn't super impressed with what Kelvin Shepard brought to the table last year. So I think Goodson's actually a reason for optimism. But like I said, there's just not a ton of weaknesses on this defense. So I think that's if you're looking for optimism on this team, it definitely starts there.
From 4-1, how do you rank the Giants in the NFC East compared to the other teams?
That's a good question. I mean, I think that the Cowboys, I think, are going to take a step back. I don't think they're going to go 13. I don't think they're going to go 13-3 again. I think they're still going to be a playoff team, but I think it's going to be a much tighter race. And obviously, the Giants have shown that they kind of have their number, that their formula to stop the run kind of works well against the Cowboys. So I think those two are probably the best teams. I think the Eagles are going to take a step up, too. So I think it's really going to be a three-team battle, and that's kind of a cop-out answer. I can't say, it's definitely going to be this team's going to run away with it. I think those three teams are all going to be in that 10-6 range, and the head-to-head matchups will probably be the deciding factor. I think the Redskins are probably a cut below, but I think those top three teams, I think it's going to be a great battle. I think it's going to be one of those deals where it probably comes down to games in Week 16 and Week 17, and that's going to determine who's going to win the division.
All right, before we let you run, other than the Odell thing, what's been the biggest story of training camp? What's up with this line story that I keep on reading about?
That's what's funny, because it was a quiet day, and then Ben McAdoo, of all people, supplied the headlines yesterday when he told a couple of offbeat stories about messages he relayed in the first team meeting. And then, of course, Odell blew him off the back pages and blew him down the line a little bit. But yeah, McAdoo came out and showed a little personality. He read a poem from Kipling to the team. It's called "If," which I guess was directed to the younger players. But then to the older players, he had a little bit more off-color story about Frazier the Lion. I'm going to try and explain this thing as quickly as I can and not get myself in trouble.
Go ahead.
The Cliff Notes version is this was a lion from a Mexican zoo who was basically going to get put out to pasture, and they sent him to a zoo, a Mexican circus, I'm sorry. They sent him to a zoo in L.A. It was like the 1970s, and somehow he really enjoyed his later years with the female lions, I guess is the euphemisms I'll use.
He was a
and
player.
Somehow it became like this cult phenomenon. And I don't even know how McAdoo stumbled across it, but I guess the message was to the older players, like, just because you're older, you still got plenty left in the tank. I mean, you can take that a lot of different ways, but the bottom line is McAdoo and all football coaches, they reach far and wide for ways to motivate and connect with their players. So somehow that's what he landed on for his first message of the new season. And I don't know. If nothing else, I'm sure it generated some laughs in the meeting room.
What player had the best reaction to it when you got a chance to talk to them?
Well, it's funny because he spoke after the players yesterday, and then today was kind of all Odell. I asked Eli about it, and he just kind of gave a typical Eli answer, like, "Oh, well, I didn't know that story, but kind of good for him." But we haven't got a chance. I mean, I think if we get some of the guys like Snacks or some of the guys with a little bigger personalities, maybe it'll be a little bit funnier at the same time. I think that's kind of died down because McAdoo is back to his button-down self, not giving any information away. I think he gave us a little treat on day one, and now it's kind of back to business now that we're into training camp.
Well, Dan, great stuff. We'll read all your work up until the end of training camp, and before we know it, the regular season, it will be here. NJ.com Giants beat reporter Dan Duggan, thanks for giving us a few minutes.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Zach.